Welcome to the Becoming Evergreen podcast, a podcast for leaders who long to grow deeply, live purposefully, and lead from a place of rest. I'm Carissa Fleming.
And I am Debbie Brunet, and we are your hosts. Our goal is to create spaces where leaders can thrive in any season, rooted, resilient, and becoming evergreen. All right. Well, hello. You're listening to the Becoming Evergreen podcast. Welcome to the show. We have somebody very special. Karen, you want to say hello to our crew?
Hello. So good to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Where are you in the world right now?
Orange County, California.
All right. Awesome. Well, we have been talking about what it looks like to become evergreen. So to be somebody who knows who they are, they have insight into what they need to learn or unlearn. They have a sustainable life and spiritual rhythms. And then they are surrounded by growth-minded people. So they're not doing this alone. That's what we've been talking about, Karen. And so we couldn't think of a better person to talk about the impact of that, of growth, fruit that actually lasts. And when we talk about the impact of those things, it just goes along with all the things that we did with the Townsend Leadership Program. So Karen and I were just realizing I actually met her maybe closer to 2018 on a beach with Carissa at the end of her first time doing the Townsend program. So Karen, I don't know what we're doing, but I think we had tacos and I don't remember what else.
That's part of growth. Tacos are always a part of growth.
I agree. I think that should be our next tagline. Karen, you met Carissa, a few years back. Carissa, when did you meet Karen? Do you remember?
Yeah, well, I met Dr. Karen Bergstrom when I was going through many life transitions. She has been with me through some of actually the most difficult transitions in my life and has been such a cheerleader, and I was meeting with her individually. And then she kept encouraging me, I think you need this group. I think you're ready. I think you're ready for this growth group. And it was the Townsend Leadership Program. And so I got to meet Karen through that and walk with her through 9 months. And then actually I got to do it again with she and her daughter, Natalie, which was also quite a wonderful experience. But I'm just going to jump in and tell the audience a little bit about you, Karen. So you're a longtime leader and coach with over 30 years of experience in the nonprofit world. You've both helped organizations and individuals grow in very meaningful, lasting ways. You have a key role in directing, and maybe you can correct me on this, co-leading Safe Families for Children. And then I found out you received the Peter Drucker Nonprofit Entrepreneur of the Year Award, which is amazing. And then you also are a team director for the Townsend Leadership Program, and you're an associate fellow at Concordia University in Irvine in the Townsend Institute. So Thank you so much for being with us. In your own words, how would you describe who you are and what you're about?
Well, I think you basically said it. Just lots of years in the nonprofit sector, and interested in the nonprofit sector. The work I was doing was more around foster care and raising who we would call Americans orphans. And so it was really a job for a 20-year-old back in the day, and then got my PhD. And so always have lived in the sector of people, really growing people up so that they can stand in their place in the world. And so that was my background. And then the Townsend Cloud model, which the title of it is the growth model, what a generic word for it, has always just been a part, even my work back in the nonprofit sector. I was always including it in treatment planning and training staff how to think about people. And so this growth model we're going to talk a little about today is just, even back in my 20s, my professional career was part of the lens of how I saw people and how we grow. So yeah, now I'm this age, so it's been a very long time. Probably my favorite new thing I'm doing is I'm a grandma to 8 sweet little grandkids here. They all live here, which is very necessary. They need to live by their mimis and pops. So I really love that. This is a new phase. There's 8 of them, and there's 8 of them in the past 6-7 years. So it's been fun.
So you're never bored, right? You've got
never bored.
You're supporting your kids as they're parenting, all the things.
Yes, really fun.
I love what you said about kind of the early work with foster families and kind of in your 20s and working with the growth model. What started that? I mean, there's a couple things you mentioned, but do you have any early memories of like what led to?
Yeah, like age 3 would be my early memory. I was born into a group. We literally at by the time I was 6, there was 6 of us. And so also because of some of this story I'll tell you about myself, I was started off being a helper, being the glue that held families to get our family together. And so early training because of difficulty of life started me off in this place that I've always been interested in. So when I saw that question you were going to ask, I'm like, yeah, I might say birth for that one. But raising, having a career starting in my 20s with foster care, we had 45 residential homes. And so we were raising youth, 6 youth to a home. We had 45 of these. They're called group homes back in the day. And so that was group work. So even my early clinical work was always 6 kids in a home that were all had been removed because of family issues. And so it's just group and family and treatment and therapy started in my family story. And then I got a PhD in it and kept going. So it feels always been there for me. Yeah.
You did your PhD, you worked with John Townsend and Henry Cloud. You've
Yeah.
got your own work as well. When
Yeah.
was that? Was that in the 30s, late 20s?
Yeah, I would say raised kids we have 4 kids, adult kids now of our own. So I took a break from leadership, kind of direct service work of clinical work, and went more into executive work, which it wasn't as personal. It was more supervising and leading organizations, which allowed my mama's heart to kind of stay with my kids. I think I needed that for some reason. So even though it looked like big girl jobs, it didn't have the personal one-on-one. And so once the kids started launching, I then started going back to my own practice. And I returned from clinical. I left the clinical world and came back as coaching and doing more of the relational coaching and the things that both of you experienced with me. And yes, John Townsend has been a colleague, friend since our 20s. Henry, John, and I in our 20s were all getting our PhDs and running around trying to change the world together. So we've had very long friendships. They proceeded to write 45 books each, and I've written 0. So we definitely aren't equal in the things we've accomplished, but we are so mutual and have hung out together for so many years. So we see the world similarly. And all 3 of us really always looked to the church as the place where we wanted the greatest sustaining, healing relationship. So even back in the day, we were knocking on church doors saying, can we teach you what we are learning in our program? So it's just been a friendship. And all 3 of us have had different paths. But currently, Dr. Towns and I are working on a lot of things together.
Well, I think we're going to ask you a number of questions about that in the future, maybe just a little bit. But starting from more of a 30,000-foot view, I know going through your program, I've gotten a chance to experience my own growth. I've gotten a chance to see others that have been in group with me grow and do amazing things. One of the things we talk about is the impact, the fruit. And I definitely experienced that conversation quite a bit with you. So when you think
Uh-huh.
of a truly healthy, growth-oriented person, what do you see? What's different about them? How do they act and how does it feel to be around them?
I think it's about desire. It doesn't really matter where we are on the road because humans all have the same capacity, in my opinion, to grow. So it really has to do with desire. That's who I want to invest in, people that have some insight and then just a hunger, a desire to go farther down the road than they're at right now. The one thing I thought of that feels really important is your own identity. And if you're somebody that knows God and has your identity with Christ, then that grounding really determines whether you get to enjoy the full capacity of what God intended. Otherwise, we tend to run around placing our identity in displaced places. And so I think people that are willing to ground themselves in who they really are and not just where they came from or who they want to be, but who are you? And so I think really that really moves people farther to where they want to be if they have a strong sense of their identity. If God is a part of your identity, then just really grounded in what's true about you. Does that kind of tell the story to start off?
Yeah, I love that. Well, Well, I think about what you just said about not your past and then not who you want to be, like the not wishful thinking, but like the actual who you are. I always think about that gut level response and just thinking about all the various things we've worked on when I was in group with you, or yeah, just not disqualifying you because of your past, but also being very accurate with who you are. Anyway, I like that.
Yeah, accurate and warm. Warm and accurate. I like those two words. There's a story in Genesis 16 about Hagar basically on a suicide mission to escape the situation she was with Sarah. And so if you read that passage, an angel who is God appeared to her, and I call it the first therapy session in the Bible, even though the Bible doesn't say it was, but I always imagine that God and Hagar sat there. But the two questions that are recorded that God asked her was, where did you come from? And where are you going? And so I think if people are willing to give attention to where you came from, where a lot of our identity was formed, not completely, or maybe in some ways it was distorted or incomplete. And then the second question, where you want to go? And from that place, she says these great words. She said, you are the God who sees me. And so that's just like being able to do that with each other, that God provides. I think you both experienced in groups I was in with you that we have to see each other, and that it really is God's superpower to give us to be able to do that. He sees us. She was aware he saw her, but even more, practice this on earth, that we are each other who sees each other. So I love that story when it comes to growth. Where did you come from? And where do you want to go? And they're both important. We don't want to hang out just in the where we came from and feel like it's impossible to be anything else, but also the hope of where do you want to go?
I think that's incredible.
Yeah.
That concept of uh, where are you going? And when you're seeking relationships, people to be in relationship with, it does feel different when there is this openness and this choice to want to pursue where you're going, to want to be open and focused on growth.
Yeah, and I think we need others to see the way because we only have eyes to see what we've seen. And so, even with you, I remember, Carissa, thinking about holding hope at times of holding hope, and I could see, easily see, and you couldn't. And then, of course, you do that for others, and people have done that for me and Debbie, being able just to hold hope because I can't see where I should go. I can only kind of, my lens is kind of distorted. So, yeah, I think it's a beautiful story of that. So I was going to share how my lens got a little distorted. I was my mom's third child and she was just 19, and then had my brother 2 years later, and we were living in poverty, pretty abusive father who was in and out of the home, not pretty abusive father who was in and out of the home. And then my mom was addicted. And so it was just a struggle for her to stay above water. And the affectionate story always told about me is that Karen was always out shopping for a husband. So this was a 2, 3, and 4-year-old Karen. And at first I was like, why was I out shopping by myself? So I'd go door to door. And the story was always told affectionate. Like, remember when Karen would just go door to door looking for a husband? And even in grocery stores. And it was just a story about me that I always went along with. And I realized, whoa, even back then, I had stopped looking for myself. That even at 2 and 3 and 4 years old, I was thinking the only way for me to have any kind of hope is to go take care of it. And so that was an inaccurate picture of what God intended for my full life, is to go knock on doors for others on behalf of others, because I was not asking for a father. I was not out shopping for a daddy. I had somehow given up on that, to be that young and already given up on that. So I thought, wow, that is really, and I had to learn that about myself because it's my superpower too. I got a PhD in knocking on doors and helping people. And so it is my superpower, but it could have such a ceiling to it if the other part of me isn't also brought in my full identity. I am bold. I've been told I'm an Enneagram 8, so I have a lot of boldness. And so it's not, that's what a little girl would do. That is who I am, but it was incomplete and distorted. So I had to learn where I came from to realize I got to add to that and still go out there into the world and stay who I am, but with much more support and without this scary belief that I have to do this and I have to do it alone. I'm very self-sufficient, which is an oxymoron in relationship. Self-sufficient is not really a real word in relationship because relationship requires other. So this very thing I'm talking about today, I had to learn. I had to learn one another and group and not just lead the group, but be in the group. We got to add our true identity and not just our early experience out of need. The good news is I did find a father who was a husband at 4 years old. One of the knock on the doors, that is who my mom married. I introduced them literally at 4 years old,
Wow.
and he became my father for my lifetime.
I didn't know that. That's
That's
amazing.
incredible.
There's a happy ending, or there was a happy ending in this story. And my mom, when my dad passed away about 5 years ago, my mom's still alive. I think there's 27 grandkids, and as of Natalie's, my daughter's, there's 44 great grandchildren. So out of this despair, and where did she come from? A whole generation changed. They came to know the Lord and so forth. But I still had to keep forming who I was, because just because good things happened, I was still formed as a young girl who thought it's up to me. And I carried that into adulthood, into career, which was really self-limiting until I grabbed it. So that's what I would love to challenge your listeners, just to keep growing, keep thinking you can be more than what you needed to be for somebody else.
Well, and I love that. And what you were saying about your own story, and I keep thinking about like the roadblocks people might be facing. And you
Mm.
kind of answered the question I was going to ask is like, what do you tend to see people's roadblocks and not moving past that part of their story? But it's also the superpower that you have. And so, what
Yeah.
would you say to that person?
Yeah, I call it defenses or hiding. And I wrote down 4 that we kind of talk about. If we could simplify all roadblocks into 4, I'd say one is a fear of dependency. So I don't want to count on you. That's definitely my challenged area. If I'm going to close down, it's going to be because I don't want to need you. You're kind of a hassle. Relationships are a hassle. Self-sufficiency is clear and straight. So kind of a fear, even though I'm not aware of it, it's just I have a general fear of depending on you. I don't want to get dropped on my head.
Hmm.
We're talking relationally here. The second one is probably abandonment, and just a kind of a deep-rooted fear you're going to leave me. So I'm not going to be who I am or really connect with you in the way. The third, Dr. Townsend, I chose the word failure, just like a fear of doing it wrong and you knowing I'm a little weak and feeling the rejection of, I can't do it perfect, so I'm not going to try. And you're not perfect, so I'm not going to try. So kind of this disqualifying attitude. And then the last word I chose, inferiority, just feeling like I'm either in charge of the world, I'm above everyone, and having that kind of a cocky attitude, or helpless. And so those are the big 4. If I were to have your listeners think about, where do I tend to close off and shut down my growth, I would choose those based on the model I worked on. I think they cover a
It's awesome. Yeah, Krista, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it definitely, you've talked about identity. We've talked a lot about limiting beliefs, and that goes into that idea of the limiting beliefs. And it's amazing. I think those things that you just mentioned are so much a part of our own stories. And so it's so easy because we have reminders, we have memories of these things actually happening. And so it makes sense that those would be roadblocks because we've experienced them. And so I know
yes.
for me, experiencing some of those roadblocks you've talked about, abandonment, um, being
Yeah.
able to trust, being able to trust that, replacing it with truth. And I think that's something we've talked about in growth. So when you talk about those
Yeah.
limiting beliefs and you replace it with truth, that's where you can actually see that growth start. Um,
I think we think beliefs are true and we need to challenge them. Sometimes they are true, but beliefs are our experiences. They're built onto our experiences. Truth is more objective. It's provable. And so the thing I believed about me, it's up to me, was not true. I did believe it for a very long time. but it wasn't true. It was inaccurate. It was incomplete. And so, yeah, let's make sure we divide belief from truth and not let them pretend that they're the same thing. Beliefs need to be challenged.
I love that. And one of our episodes, we talked about something John had mentioned, the observant self versus the harsh judge and that whole thing. And so I found that to be so helpful of
Yes.
you've got these beliefs and what's true, and then also what's our role in the limiting beliefs and how do you tell
Yeah.
the difference?
And kindness, because we have those beliefs because they were necessary to survive. And so we don't want to torture ourselves about it or have great regret. It's more we just want to outgrow it. So in kindness, it leads us to change.
I love that. Well, I'm curious. We talked about getting stuck, some of those different things that get in our way. Um, and you've walked alongside different people through this process. Do you have any examples? Again, one you have permission to share. But
Yeah.
any examples of walking alongside people and just what has that journey tended to look like? You can get as specific or vague as you need to to honor people's story.
About people, I guess I'm
Yeah.
remembering, I currently run these groups, and I remember a very successful executive coming to one of the groups and very buttoned up. People were in jeans and kind of casual. They were there for an intensive week of growth, and he wasn't casual and nervous. He was like, "What am I doing here?" And he didn't share. It was third day of the week and he hadn't shared, and people had really started sharing things, and it's a whole workshop they're doing. And at some point I'm like, "You want to give it a try?" And he was terrified. And finally he said, "Well, I'll just tell you a little about my story." And he started telling the story of leaving on his bicycle with a single mom on his bicycle to go to Little League by himself, 9 years old, maybe 8. And typical day, came home, his mother had hung herself and was dead. And he was the only witness of it. And he's telling the story, and the whole group has tears going down their face. People are gasping, and he feels nothing. He is telling his story about a person. And he stopped and he looked around and he said, "What's happening?" The mirroring of his story was the first time, I guess, that he had ever had witnesses or been able to share in that way. And he literally said, "What's happening? Why are you sad?" And I said, "Why don't you ask her?" And then, "Why don't you ask him?" And they were able to mirror the God who sees me, the people. And I think that his life on that day, I saw a shift. Also, he wore jeans the next day, so he really lightened up a little bit. I think he couldn't look at his story. He was on his third divorce, very successful, but very sad, felt very unwanted, and didn't understand why he couldn't stay in relationships with people. So that story stuck with me. It just, without to witness that was something else, to see him literally say, "What is happening?" And he needed them to feel his story on behalf of himself. So I thought of him when I saw you were going to ask me that question. I could give you a lot of them, but that's the one that was so impactful for me.
Wow, that sounds extremely difficult.
Yeah, he had to close it down.
I think, Karen, when you talk about that, the light, right, that comes in when you bring some of those things that are incredibly difficult in our stories to light in front of safe people, that paves the way to be able to grow. It paves the way to be able to experience forgiveness for ourselves
Yeah.
or forgiveness for our own stories and be able to move forward. And I know that that's been impactful for me personally. Walking through your group is I've shared my story more than once. I've shared it with an amazing group once and twice, and actually both times were impactful. And it's amazing how each moment you share something like that, the Lord can highlight something else in your story that He wants to address too, to help us grow forward. So
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking about that. But I can't imagine being that little boy or being that grown man, not being able to really, um, not being able to know that you're safe and know that you're taken care of and have to do that in front of a group of people, but actually to find safe people in that moment makes a difference.
Uh, mm. Yeah, we weren't created to be alone, and he was too alone. He ended up going into foster care because his dad didn't want to come get him, and father lived in another state. But the aloneness was probably his greatest harm. I mean, losing his mom was his greatest harm, but the aloneness of that is why I think it took him so many years to find somebody.
Isolation, right? And so you've definitely talked about
Yes.
the just not doing these things in isolation. Um, Truly incredible. Thank you for sharing that story. I'm sure that there are a few people that may be hearing this and actually feeling really impacted by this story. And if you have any questions, please reach out. If you want to talk about it more, please reach out. Dr. Bergstrom, we've discussed and talked about the John Townsend growth model and just kind of on a very surface level. Like there's so much more I know we could go into, but one of the fun, exciting things that I think has been growing over the years is this growth model, but also the TPRAT. Can you tell us a little bit about the TPRAT, what it is, and how you're using it and what your role is with it?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it is actually a valid instrument, an assessment, the Townsend Relational Assessment Tool. It's about 12 years old, done all the research and hired all the right people, and we reached validity and reliability. So that's pretty cool to have this assessment. So it's basically evaluating your relational capacity. So you know how there's IQ, which doesn't change, and there's EQ, emotional quotient. This is more your relational quotient, and it's your self-assessment of what you believe is your character capacities or your relational capacities. And the academic terms are your attachment score, your separation score, your integration score, and your adulthood score, which means nothing to you exactly, but it's basically just how you are formed in relationships. And then it identifies where you kind of have your high sweet spot relationally and where you have your challenge. I mentioned earlier, my challenge is more the bonding, trusting part of relationships would be my challenge. So I won't explain all of those, but that basically is a neuroscience framework for growth, those three capacities.
And we will put the link to the TPRAT in the show notes in case anyone would like to learn a little bit about it. I know you've used that in your groups, you've used it with growth organizations. I'm curious
Yes.
how this factors into using it with a group, with an organization versus using it with an individual and what you see in terms of differences for the different groups that you use it with.
Yeah, I would say for individuals, it's who you are, your own capacity. And then for teams, we use the same scores and just give you a team's report or a family report or a marriage report of who you are with your partner. So it's how your strengths and your challenges interact with each other. So, for instance, I gave it to a church team of 80 pastors, very large church, and they were lowest in boundaries and they were highest in bonding and closeness. So they're very warm, kind, boundaryless team. And we talked for a long time about what that might look like for them and then set some cool relational culture kind of goals to grow the strength and the boundaries. It's not that complicated, but I won't get into it. But just them identifying that gave them a sense of what their culture is and what they really need to put into their system as a group to sharpen each other. And all of the growth required is with each other. So the only way to grow your scores is in relationship. I like to say, resume what God intended for you. We stop growing or we pause because of life. And so it's not really about starting growth ever. It's about resuming the trajectory God created you to be on. But we pause because of different reasons. And so we all, no matter what age we are, want to resume the growth that was intended for all humans.
Giving this type of tool to a boundaryless group and recognizing that, oh, this is actually trackable. You can take a test and it shows you where you need to grow. Have you seen these organizations be able to establish a plan for moving forward that actually works?
Yes, because no one's a zero. No one's boundaryless, actually. It's a continuum. So yes, I think it's so profitable to give it a name for what we're doing here or what we're frustrated about. And again, it's not the competency of this group as pastors, it's their character structure. And so you balance that all out. And it's really based on iron sharpening iron. So it's based on finding others who have it and growing it and reading and experience it. So I think it just turns a light on. It's like, oh, that's what you call this thing we do here.
Mm-hmm.
A different group I was with that wasn't a church, the C-suite team were all low in boundaries too, just strangely enough. All five of them, it was their lowest leaders. And one of the leaders said, what does it mean that all five of us are lowest in this? And so I had a wisdom moment that I don't always have. I paused and said to the team, the rest of the staff there, what is it like to work here when all five of the C-suite is lowest in that? And I stopped teaching. The rest of the session was staff sharing what it's like to have all the leadership be lower in this. And it was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And plus, I didn't have to work very hard. I just facilitated a very honest discussion. And they were saying things like it's exhausting. We don't stick with anything. We always have a new idea, a new thing to chase. It doesn't feel solid. Nobody's confronting anyone because it's too hard for us. They just shared things that you could take right out of a boundaries book, but it was personal and relevant to their organization. And they really built some great ways to put some safeguards in as these people were all working on their growth. So I just think it gives it a name. I think this assessment is great for naming relationally what your character capacity is. So yeah, I'd encourage everyone to get some insight. When you get your results, you also get a little manual, how to grow. So you can click on the link and then look at opportunities you have. We've kind of built out growth for you. It's human, it's not clinical. It's not testing your clinical state. It's really just collecting your capacity of where you're at. And I was just saying where you need to resume growth.
That's awesome. Well, and I think about, because I did the TPRAT a couple times since, and it was wild how in each season there were slightly different ones that I was low on. On one of the years, it was to do with the integration one, which I think is the third one. And it was like getting your reality to match your current.
Mm-hmm.
And so the key into there was grief. That was my season. And then you and I were joking with Carissa about adulting, that last one.
Yeah.
That's been the most recent kind of theme. And then now this year, it's been kind of going back to the first one with the
Yeah.
connection of
Return.
belonging.
Yeah. You got to keep returning to it and sharpening. The adulthood one is about mutuality,
Mhm.
is realizing that all adults at some point we stand in mutual potential. And just like I said, Dr. Townsend's written 44 books. I'm not mutual author to him. I'm not an equal, but we're mutual humans. And you can't find a human that is not mutual to you and your potential. So it's kind of cool that we don't have to stand above or below, which I think we as a country need to learn the art of mutuality. Me included, me included.
I agree.
I love that idea that if you're low in one of those areas, I know you've talked about finding somebody who's not low in that same area, hang out with somebody who's actually that's their highest. Um, and I think you
Yeah.
could probably recognize it at times. And if you can't, it's always good to, go back and look at your group if you're a part of one of these types of groups. But that's been helpful too.
We may not be attracted to our differences, but we need our differences. We need people that have a different strength than we do. We tend to want to hang out in uniformity, but we do need to be challenged and unified. So just because we're saying do it doesn't mean it's easy. It's kind of challenging to be around people that have a strength we don't have.
That's awesome. Any final thoughts, Carissa, before we wrap up and kind of close things out with our final episode of the season?
Yes, what a privilege.
It's been such a privilege. But as we wrap up, I guess I would like to ask, what's the most important thing that you would want our listeners to walk away with about what it means to grow and bear fruit?
I think just to return to the beginning when we talked about know where you came from, examine your past for the purpose of going a long way down the road, and then just you guys have heard this from me, just don't go alone. You have an opportunity to have a relational God if that's your choice, and you have humans. The relationships are available. We just need to access. So we weren't created to be alone. Know where you came from, dream about and desire where you want to go, and then go with.
I love that. And I know you doing a lot of different things right now. What is one thing you're really excited about in this next season? Just a fun question.
Definitely the T Prat. Definitely the 8 grandchildren. But that's not relatable maybe to everyone. But this T Prat, we're taking it to market in a new way. And I'm so excited about just the next phase that we're in. If you're not in this little bubble, the Townsend bubble, you don't know about it. And we are in the process of changing that. And it's exciting. Great meetings in the last month. And I'm so excited about letting everybody have access that wants it.
That's awesome. Is there anywhere people can go to find this or any of other projects you're working on? Where would they go?
I think the tprat.com has some articles. The Dr. Townsend wrote an article for Washington Post called The Character Structure of Jesus. Just between all of you, he didn't take the assessment, Jesus didn't, but we gave him straight hundreds, and talked about what perfection would look like in a character structure. What were we intended to be? So that article is there on the tprat.com. And then take the T-Prat and get together with friends. I was just in New York with my daughter, and she called it Psych Night, which is a very silly word for it. And she had all of her friends gather in New York, and we had Psych Night. And they all took the T-Prat, and they had so much fun. It went on and on, longer than I thought it would, or maybe wanted it to go. But it was so exciting as they looked at each other and knew each other differently with this shared language. So I like that organic thing that happened last week, which I do find that happens, but probably even more is just finally these brilliant strategists are on our team to say, here's how you take it to market and let the world have access. The world, I'm not just saying some people. I do think kind of big, but that makes me excited. Both of you think big too, so I know you like thinking in terms of the world.
We do. We tend to dream now and again.
You do. I know that about both of you. That's probably what I'm excited. Reading stories to first graders, grandchildren. That was pretty fun yesterday. And then also just being a part of this new strategic team that's going to take it.
I like this psych night idea, Carissa. Do you want to host psych nights and have that with your friends? I think that'd be hilarious.
I like the idea of shared language. Yeah.
I said, it's not psych, it's human. Call it human night. She goes, no, that's not catchy. Psych night's cuter. I'm like, okay. Yeah.
Well, Karen, I know that people might be interested in learning more about you. If they wanted to connect with you or learn more about the work that you're doing, how could they do that?
I just thought I'll offer you my email address. It's probably the best way to
Okay.
find me and get me to find you. So Karen at drbergstrom.net. And the Townsend Leadership Program has a whole website too. So maybe I'll give that to you for in your notes if you want to find out about the program in your area, because they're all over the country. That's probably the 2 ways to find me.
Great. Well, Karen, we're so grateful to have you. This episode has been incredibly special to both Debbie and myself. And we're just so thankful for you in both of our lives. I know I speak for myself, and I believe I'm speaking for Debbie too, but it's just been an incredible privilege. So thank you for being here with us.
I echo that. Incredible privilege.
Well, and you heard some early iterations of our dreaming about this podcast. So it's really fun and feels very fitting to close with you as our guest because you got to hear some of the early ideas. I don't know, Carissa, when was that?
Yeah. So I'm your illuminator. I saw you, I listened to your dreams, and I still remember them. And when you asked me to do the podcast, I'm like, oh, this is so good. This is what they were talking about 10 years ago, and they did it. So congratulations, and thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Karen.
Yep. You're welcome.
Hey, it's Carissa here. Thanks so much for listening. And before we go, I want to tell you about something that I am super excited about. The Fall 2026 Becoming Evergreen Retreat is happening October 23rd through 25th at Mount Hermon Conference Center near Santa Cruz, California, nestled in the Redwoods. It's amazing, and we want you to be there with us. So come, bring your team, your life group, or a friend, and join us in the Redwoods. Register at becomingevergreen.com.